All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. So thanks everyone for joining us for From Building to Selling, X Factor Pre-Sales Professionals with Angis Kinsey. My name is Dan Hickson. I'm the Director of Strategic Sales here at Consensus, and I will be the moderator for today. DEMOFEST is presented by Consensus. Consensus is intelligent demo automation software that helps scale pre-sales with interactive video demos. You can learn more at goconsensus.com, or actually put a link to one of these automated demos in the chat box. So click on that and view one. Consensus is proud to provide this event for free to all attendees. However, we would like to invite each of you to donate to our company's humanitarian organizations if you would like to. You can learn more about this and donate via the link in the reception, or visit our expo hall and check out our DEMOFEST Gives Back booth. You can also click the link in the chat box for that as well. All right, just some housekeeping items. We encourage you to participate in today's session. On the right side of your console, you can see a few ways to engage with us throughout the session. The chat function will allow you to engage with us as well as others. Throughout the session, you will see a poll. We have a poll that will be coming up, so we encourage you to participate in that. Our speaker will be taking questions from the audience at the end of the session, but we encourage you to post those questions in the Q&A box at any time. And if at any time you're having technical difficulties, toggle to your profile in the upper right corner and click Get Support. All right, now I would like to introduce our speaker. Angis Kinsey is a multi-skilled tech professional who recently made the jump to pre-sales. His career has challenged him to become adept at change management and learning via experimentation and reflection. He has built applications from scratch as a software engineer, advised teams and executives as a Scrum and Agile coach, driven value as a product owner, built teams as a recruiter, and he currently tells stories that win deals as a sales engineer. And with that, I will turn the rest of the time over to you, Angis.
Thanks, Dan. Really appreciate that. So I just want to start out by saying hello, everyone. In addition to all of that great info Dan gave you, I like to see myself as a reformed software engineer. And said another way, I am currently aspiring to be an X Factor pre-sales professional. And I think part of becoming one is always aspiring to be one. Lao Tzu, who is the preeminent Chinese Tao philosopher, said that the wise man is one who knows what he does not know. And I interpret that as a call for action towards continuous improvement, which is at the heart of what it takes to be wise or to be an X factor in anything. So we're here to talk about X Factor pre-sales professionals, and more particularly transitioning technical minds to the pre-sales function. In today's world, when the competition for sales engineers is more fierce than ever, I think it's important to keep close at hand the knowledge of what it takes to find new people that will be successful in the role. I think it's easier to transition from a highly technical role to a sales engineering role than any other path. And I believe that the people with a technical background coming into pre-sales will absolutely have an X factor if they're able to build the rest of that skill set needed. However, I say that it might be the easiest path. It's still by no means easy to make that jump. So with that in mind, I believe that there's particular relevance today to be considering how to make that transition, and that's what we're here to talk about. So just a few questions I want to pose to you here at the beginning before I fill you up with all of my thoughts. If you feel compelled, I'd love to scroll back through later on and read through if you want to share anything in the comments, but more than anything, just I'd like you to keep this in consideration. And the first piece, how would you define who an X Factor pre-sales professional is? And the second one being, can every engineer become an X Factor pre-sales professional? So this is our agenda for the day. I'm going to start out with a little bit of my own personal background and insight into the perspective I'm offering, and more just context for the talk. Then I'll jump into what skills are a prerequisite for technical people making that transition. I'll talk a little bit more particularly about who can make that transition and what's in their background that might be a good leading indicator of getting to that X Factor pre-sales professional level. And then finally, I'll be talking about what gaps will exist and how will you fill them. So essentially, where will we need to focus on growing those people? So let's jump into the background. This picture is around 12 years old now, sitting in rural Wisconsin in the bitter cold, playing some chess with my dad at the kitchen table. And I was about 15 then. And when I was that age, about once or twice a week, I'd be sitting at that exact kitchen table with my dad in the evening, badgering him with questions about work. And he was going through at the time an Agile Scrum transformation. And for whatever reason, at 15, I was hungry to understand how large groups of people can improve their productivity by transitioning their mindset and way of working via the implementation of a simple framework. What I wasn't expecting was that those kitchen conversations would inspire me down the road to excel at learning and making my own transitions. And what I learned at that table set the foundation for a career that in its early days would be defined by honest self-assessment and constant evolution. Now, a few years later, when that kitchen table in my memory no longer existed, I went to college at UW-Madison, where in 4 years, I was at one point or another a declared nuclear engineer, mechanical engineer, electrical engineer, and computer engineer, all before graduating with mathematics and computer science degrees. And Dan went over this a little bit. After graduating, I was a software engineer for 3 years, and a good one, but I knew that it wasn't the thing that I wanted long-term. I wanted something that I was more passionate about, and for me, that meant something more people-centric. After that, Scrum and Agile coaching, product ownership, before it was almost exactly a year ago today, I accepted my first sales engineering role. Now, with my current tenure as a sales engineer being only around a year, I did find myself asking why I'm qualified to speak on the topic of sales engineering. And what I do lack in tenure of pre-sales experience, I make up for with nearly 10 years of tenure working in high velocity environments that have constantly required me to evolve, transition, and learn and change. So I have a lot of experience being in transition, which includes thinking hard about how to make it, why someone would make it, and what challenges that you will face during transitions. So with my background in math, I do like the things that I'm talking about to be proven and bulletproof. And I'm naturally a very logical thinker. So I found myself wanting to also validate my perspective as I was building out this concept. So in service of that, I talked with some people with both a less technical background that have made their way into pre-sales, as well as people with a technical background that want to stay technical. I personally filled the gap as a person who comes from a highly technical place into pre-sales, so there is still a little bit of personal bias, and would love to hear your feedback and questions in relation to that. So some of the things that I heard from pre-sales people who did not start out highly technical was that they're missing some context, some of that empathy of understanding exactly what technical people are doing. And it's a background that those less technical people wish that they had in order to be able to better connect and sell, essentially. What I heard from technical people that want to stay technical, and I'll read this out: give me an engineering problem, and I'm totally comfortable solving it and discussing it with another engineer. When I actually need to go and spread the word and share the information, that's when it gets tough. So I asked you a couple of these questions earlier. My personal belief is that highly technical people can become X-Factor pre-sales professionals, but not everybody, and there will be some things to learn in order to get there. So what problems are we solving in pre-sales? I think it's pretty easy to see engineers, technical people, they're problem solvers. So what are the difference between the problems they're solving and the ones that we solve? What we're solving as sales engineers or pre-sales people are people problems. And you could make the argument that you'll face people problems everywhere, but I believe that that is truly the crux of what we're doing in pre-sales. You can explain the technical concepts or even just deliver a recorded or canned demo anywhere, but how do you work to facilitate people in their buying process in order to eventually make their lives better with your product? Now that's an interesting problem to me. So right into the next section. what skills and traits will be a prerequisite of a technical person who wants to make this transition? I'm going to essentially ignore any sort of technical background. We're going to assume that part is working well, and what else do we need to add on to that in order to be essentially ready to make that change? The first piece here, I think it's pretty obvious. You need to have some presentational prowess. And I think that this is something that you certainly need to have before you even jump into sales engineering. Being a sales engineer is a position of learning, and there's always going to be room for growth and improvement. But I don't think that you can be successful without some of that talent beforehand. The first time that you've been in a high pressure situation in front of a professional group where you're the primary person talking and leading a conversation shouldn't be on a sales call. You need to be on, confident, and at 100% in order to be an X factor sales engineer. To get there, you need to have been through the trials and tribulations and have built up thick skin and confidence that won't be shaken by things like unexpected questions or direction that's given by the people you're selling to. You need to be able to roll with the punches and stay in control of the conversation. And I'm sure you've all heard it, but what we do is sell every day. And we're selling to people who don't buy every day. So we always need to maintain confidence and be in the lead of those conversations. And that leads me right into my next point here. Being in the lead and comfortable in these sorts of presentational situations, you also need some creativity and confidence. And I also like to think of this as just general swagger. So as an X Factor pre-sales engineer, you are the central point of what I'll call prospect and internal data synthesis. And when I say internal data synthesis, what I'm talking about is all the information that I, as a pre-sales professional, know about our company and our products. When I combine that to say prospect and internal data synthesis, I mean that you're the crux in a two-way megaphone that needs to work closely with both internal teams to communicate what you're seeing and hearing in the field, and you need to take everything that you know about your company and communicate it to a prospect in a way that's best for them. As an X Factor pre-sales professional, you have an ear to the market and you know what's coming. You're the first to hear a customer's pain points before they've even purchased the thing that you claim will solve their problem. So you're in those discoveries, those demos, listening and finding out that pain. So then after that, you're the creative synthesizer of information that closes deals, wins customers, and can influence the building of a better product for tomorrow. So you need to be confident in the opinions that are synthesized from all of that information coming at you. You need to own that process and talk like your words have weight. There's a certain amount of swagger that really does go along with being in this consultative role, paired with that creativity to execute in frequent ambiguity that I think is absolutely vital. The next piece is honesty, and this is something that's personally very important to me. And I'd go as far as calling it one of my core tenets. As it applies to sales engineers, first of all, prospects can smell bullshit. And I also believe that one of the most powerful things that honesty can serve for a pre-sales engineer is the building of yourself as a trusted advisor. In my mind, trust is built through honesty first and follow through second. And something that I commonly refer back to for inspiration on how to stay honest in business is the book Getting Naked by Patrick Lencioni. It's an excellent business fable full of practical examples of the execution and impact of honesty. And I'll have a link on us or a little section on my slide at the very end where I'll reference that book as well. A few examples of how a pre-sales professional will leverage their honesty. Are you starting to realize that your product might not be a great fit for your prospect after doing some initial discovery and maybe even a demo? I'm not saying to walk away from business, but that is an opportunity to be honest and build trust with your prospects. They'll come back to you when they do need your product. Telling them your honest opinion about the fit establishes you as a trusted advisor. Another example, is there some danger or red flags that you're seeing on a deal? You can let your account executive know so that you can both spend your time on deals that will actually bring in money. The trusted advisor hat is not a hat that you simply put on. It's something you have to earn. And you don't only need to earn it with your prospects. You need to earn it with your account executives, your product, marketing, and competitive intelligence teams in order to perform at that X factor level. And honesty is at the root of that. So keeping in mind those few examples in the end of internal teams that you're working with, product, marketing, competitive intelligence, you're working with all different types of people. You need to have priority always at top of mind, and you need to be good at it. As a pre-sales professional and an X Factor one, you're going to be pulled in all sorts of different directions, and you need to know which are the top 2 or 3 priorities at all times. This isn't something that you can have your hand held on. It's something that you need to be able to do confidently and communicate it well. You need to be able to, for example, communicate to an AE while you're prioritizing some trial support over a fresh demo, or while you're advising to avoid spending too much time on a specific opportunity, maybe there's some risk there, or simply how you need to work on closing current business before attending a marketing event. So what are some other things that we're going to be, those other directions that we can be pulled in? First of all, of course, working to deliver demos, but beyond that, working to improve your delivery of demos. You need to learn about the competition. You need to understand to the point that you're able to teach and communicate new features as they're released, which includes building talk tracks and more repeatable demos around those new features. And you also need to be working to build a culture of performance at your team. You can't scale or be successful without people around you who are similarly motivated and enabled. And it's only your responsibility to promote this over, only your responsibility to promote this over time as an X Factor pre-sales engineer. It's not something to be shirked or passed off to other members of the team. So with all of these responsibilities considered, you need to know when and where each of them deserves to be at the top of the list. And I would argue that none of those things should be put off completely for more than a couple of weeks at a time if you want to truly be performing. Excuse me. All right. Now, before I get to the last on my list of prerequisite skills, I'm going to throw a poll up there quickly. Dan, can you help me out? So this is
got it. It should be there for everyone.
Great. What percentage of the time does everything in a demo go perfectly? And if you're not giving demos every week, you could also think about this what percentage of the time do you have a 30-minute hour conversation that you wouldn't go back and change how you position something or how you even a sentence or two? So what I'm seeing in the results here is nobody is essentially perfect. And there's a majority of the votes coming in around between 0 and 25%. So the point that I want to make to build from there is if very, very, maybe never you have everything in a demo go perfectly, you need to maintain a learning mindset and resilience in order to have them at least go better every time you're doing them. And I think that learning mindset is absolutely essential. And it also builds directly from that concept of honesty that we touched on. You need to not just be continuously performing, but recognize that nothing will be perfect and commit to continuous improvement. And the honesty bit, your honesty, and particularly your honesty with self, and honest self-assessment will keep your eyes open to where you're strong, where you're weak, and then also, of course, the opportunities for growth. From there, you will leverage your resilience to maintain that mindset even when things get tough and continue to improve. And finally, if you're not committed to continuous improvement, having a learning mindset, then you are at risk of continuous stagnation. This is something that I believe is an absolute must. All right, so let's move on to who can make this transition. So I've talked about some traits that will be good leading indicators of success in pre-sales. What types of backgrounds might be in service of building up those traits? We're not looking for engineers who can just squeeze out a presentation when they need to. We're looking for passionate people who are going to excel in this role that come from a technical background. So first of all, I would say customer-facing backgrounds are excellent. Consulting, post-sales or implementation, these types of roles will enable you to have that deep level of prospect empathy and communication that's necessary to close more deals than your competitors. Consultants are managing expectations, always doing discovery, and executing to provide value. Implementers are managing expectations and timelines. Support engineers are hearing what problems are coming in from the market and directly solving them. Next up, I have product engineers up on the board, and I make a particular distinction between a software engineer and a product engineer. And the way I define that is that a product engineer is someone who's worked in an environment where they're directly building new features for customers based on feedback coming in and differentiating value. The environment of a product engineer is one of close collaboration with a product team, always considering and inspecting how things are built, with consideration for minimum viable products and time to value, as well as the technical trade-offs of building fast and staying ahead of the competition with quick release cycles. Product engineers will have a leg up on being value-focused in a deal and identifying how a prospect's pain points line up with value propositions that come from your technical products. And last on this list of backgrounds that I would look for is anyone that's been in a sort of servant leader role, like a scrum master or a team lead. When you are an X-Factor pre-sales engineer, you're going to be doing things like leading proof of concepts, going above and beyond to prep custom demos, enabling the success of post-sales, and you really are that X factor, the crux of a sale. You're the person who gets the deal over the line as an X-Factor pre-sales professional. Approaching SE activities with a servant leader mindset and executing well will set you ahead of your competition and win you more deals. And that servant leader mindset really helps to build trust with your prospects and everyone in your organization that will rely on you. All right, so our last section for the day, the gaps that someone coming from a technical background will have and how we're going to address them. So we've been over the intangibles of someone who will be successful in making the transition. We've talked about the backgrounds. Let's dig into where we'll need to grow with that background. The first piece is going to be communication and communication style. And this is absolutely something that I needed to learn and that I continue to work on. So when I started out as a technical mind, I quickly found that the people problems were the more difficult ones to solve, which is actually what attracted me. Maybe it was a bit masochistic. I wanted to solve the hardest problems. I think at the very least, I found the most interesting problems were the ones that happened to be the most difficult for me. So something that I took away from some of those early learnings was related to my communication style particularly. So I'm naturally very direct and logical. And what I realized is that if I want my business interactions or really any conversation to be successful, if that is my desire, and in sales, if I actually want to sell anything, it's on me. If it's my desire to have that communication go well, it's nobody else's responsibility to just understand what I'm saying and how I'm saying it. It's my responsibility to find out where they are and meet them there. Some people will have this trait by default. You know, their empathy is turned up to 11. Their communication always seems to work right. I do not. And I know that many of my more technical peers also don't have this trait by default. However, I have seen some amazing gains through intentional practice with the things that I learned from a couple books, which I'm referencing there as well. Those are Difficult Conversations and Emotional Intelligence 2.0. I think those are places that I would start in essentially pushing along the line of practicing that stuff every day. The next piece, things that we'll have to learn as technical people, is being very value focused. So a technical brain is wired to solve things in a robust, foolproof, and airtight fashion with no ambiguity. Solving technical problems can take time, be complicated in execution, and complicated to explain. An X-Factor pre-sales engineer will be able to focus and tie everything that they talk about, no matter how technical, to the value that it will provide to the prospect and the ease with which the prospect will achieve that value. They don't overcomplicate things, they don't get lost in the weeds, and they stay tight to the value. And again, sales is often ambiguous and can come down to gut feel. Deals can be closed because of a personal relationship, or maybe you took someone out to dinner. And my point here in mentioning that is that having the best technical solution and being able to communicate that it is the best isn't enough. And as such, being value focused instead of pure technical solution focused is an absolute must for the X Factor pre-sales professional. You must always keep value in mind, and even when talking about technical points, find ways to demonstrate value instead of relying on the ability to talk a technical concept to death. I do believe that this is something that's hard to teach without context, and I would say learning it relies on being exposed to practical examples and getting a lot of feedback from your peers in order to grow. Now, the cardinal sin of this is not it's not going into the weeds. It's going into the weeds and not coming back to tie things together to value. So there's really an art to pulling yourself out at the right time and bringing your audience along with you. Now, the next two pieces kind of go together. In my experience, there are two challenges that will never stop rearing their head, and they're part of what makes that learning mindset so vital to the achievement and maintenance of that X Factor status. Both of them are still directly related to communication, and for me, I think it's part of what makes this job a blast. So, how do we get people to solve, the right problems or have the right conversations at the right time? Well, this is the fun bit, the hard bit, and the part of being a pre-sales engineer that should get your blood moving. So let me paint you a picture. You've met with your prospect and given an initial demo. You're in the thick of it and you've made it past that first round. Now you're having a second product demo with more technical people in the room, be it more of them or the fact that they're even more technical. They're bringing in things like architects. Those people are dragging you towards explaining the ins and outs of the networking of your SaaS application and want to discuss things like SLAs, other technical topics like that. But in addition to those technical people, the director of product at your prospect is also in the room. And he happens to be the decision maker, the guy that will push things through if he likes what he's seeing, the guy with the budget to spend that needs to make an impact. He's not here to dive into the technical details. He's here because people on his team told him that this tool could improve a process that would save them time and allow them to focus on building new and interesting features that will impact his product's market share. You can see where I'm going with this. As a sales engineer with a deep technical background, you do have the ability to go into the weeds and to build trust with the technical organization. You understand the product at all levels of abstraction and can have those conversations with people at sort of every level in a way that serves their context. But if you aren't careful and intentional, you might have the wrong conversation at the wrong time, or the right conversation at the wrong time. It's all too easy to just sort of lean into the technical background and not be in service of this person that's the decision maker. It's an important skill to have to be able to speak to those technical things, but flexing those muscles pales in importance with building relationships and trust with your prospects, which does not follow quickly from something like a lecture style info dump that doesn't acknowledge the right people in the room. Now, I think that there's some ambiguity in that example as well, and it's intentional. I don't think that it's necessarily obvious that in a room full of technical people with and a non-technical decision maker, that you should be, for example, only serving that decision maker in that conversation. And I think that's sort of the art of this sort of work. That X Factor pre-sales engineer will be keeping all this information in his head as he targets the conversation to where he believes will be the best fit to move the deal forward based on all of the other context that I left out. So there's a few ways I see to address the issue of solving the correct problem at the correct time. The first of which is defining the problem that you're solving at a time. Clearly outlining the goals for the next meeting with a prospect with your AE. Beyond that, clearly outlining the goals with the prospects. I think those are often done best when they're done jointly. What is that next step? What hurdle are we trying to get over? Maybe in that example before, we do know that this is a more technical conversation and we don't need to be in service of that director of product. It's all in those contexts and details, and that's the art. Something to always keep in mind is your use of the parking lot to direct conversations that are happening at the wrong time. Let's come back to that. We can schedule another deep dive on that at another time. Draw things back to the value and the purpose that you've outlined with your prospects and with the rest of your team. So the second of the two issues that will never stop rearing their head, in my opinion, is going to be what I call the curse of knowledge or the curse of expertise. And this is when you assume that your knowledge of a situation is shared by the people that you're talking with. And if you're a sales engineer selling a technical product, this is something that you always need to keep an eye on. And I believe that solving this issue is done essentially by keeping an eye on it and always being aware that you could drift into that space where the place that you're living in your head isn't shared by the people in the room around you. You can do that by always doing your best to be active listening to your prospects. There's an art to knowing when to shut up and listen. And for me, it's something I'm always working on. And sometimes it goes as far as even, don't ask a follow-up. Let them sit and think and then tell you what those problems are that they're having. If you keep an eye on it through that awareness, you will find places to ask for feedback during a demo or working session. Check in on your prospects. Ask them if they're following where you're going or if what you're saying makes sense to them. Let them get a word in and don't ramble. The height of this problem will be when you're overconfident, talking quickly, you're solving something at your pace with your knowledge and background, not letting other people get in edgewise. And the consequences, they'll glaze over and nod along, agreeing with what you're saying, but not internalizing it. And it's not really having an impact on them. That's not the way to build a trusted advisorship. If you do catch yourself doing this, the Midwestern in me would want to say, oh, sorry, are you following? Or have I overcomplicated things? Let's take a step back. Where did I lose you? And then we'll dive back in at the level that you're comfortable with. So if you keep an eye on things, if you're always listening, paying close attention to what your prospects are saying with their voices, with their eyes, with their body language, this is something that you'll be able to overcome and address. But I think you always need to keep it in mind. It's not something that can be solved forever. And that wraps up my content for today. I would love to connect. And in fact, this is the first time that I've presented at a conference like this. So would definitely appreciate any feedback on the content, things like that. I should mention that my friend Becca and I just released a podcast that we're calling the Angis Podcast. First episode came out last week and we talked about building connections. And the second one is on the learning mindset, and that's coming out the next day or two, and then regularly Tuesdays when I'm not doing things like prepping for a conference. So yeah, if there's any, I'm going to flip over to the other screen and check and see if there's any Q&A that's coming in. And
I encourage you, if you have any questions, go ahead and put those in either the chat or the Q&A. I actually had one, Angus. So you were talking about like potential roles being, a product engineer and possibly even like a software engineer.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned before that, though, that you want to be somewhat experienced and, not have your first, demo be with a prospect. What ways would someone like that get to that level? Is that an internal teaching as they move to that role? What things would you suggest there?
Absolutely. I mean, one of the easiest things to point to, because I believe that you can do this anywhere, is doing things like Toastmasters. There's organizations all over the country, probably all over the world, where you can get together and deliver presentations on pretty much any topic. That's a good way to get some of that background and experience. Another way, leading things like if you're a software engineer on a software team, a way that I practice this, leading an external facing product demo, or how do you call it? Like a sprint review or a retrospective, you know, really stepping up, taking a leadership role in the growth of your team, things like that. Does that answer the question?
Okay, great. Yeah, no, that's perfect. Thank you. So Tyler has a question if you want to go to the Q&A.
Yeah, I see that. So I'll read it out as well. As far as establishing yourself as a trusted advisor, how do you come into an org and start giving them advice, giving the org advice on their business when they may have decades more experience than you? That is an excellent question, and it's something that I have faced in my career and learned how to not do it. I would say, number one, be in service of people. You know, let them know that you're there to help. Show them that you're going above and beyond to help to solve their problems. There's an art to coming into an org, a very established org, and essentially leading without authority, having conversations and getting other people to pick up your ideas and run with them. I don't have that problem completely solved, but I think it's having low ego, being willing to give credit to other people, and just being willing to demonstrate that you're there to help and assist, no matter how trivial the problem. Does that answer the question? Any follow-up, Tyler?
Yep. Okay. Well, I think we are good then. So let's go ahead and wrap up here. So just a couple extra notes here. So we want to remind everyone that each session that you attend gets you an entry into our raffle to win some amazing prizes. To attend as many sessions as you can. Our final session, which is coming up next, it's the next session actually, is where we're going to be raffling off all those prizes. So make sure you click over and go to that one after this. We're excited to announce that DEMOFEST is going to be on the road. Be sure to attend our last session on May 19th to find out what cities we will be in this year. We also encourage you to stop by our expo hall to visit our premier partners of DEMOFEST. Reminder that there is no transfer of money involved in this event. All of our partners have gone above and beyond to contribute to making this event a success for all of you. And then once again, up next is our final presentation. So make sure that you head over to the stage area to join, and I will see you all there. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.